This was not localized to Madras. These famines spread throughout the entirety of India and also around the entire globe. The 1876 to 77 famine was only the first of successive global famines in a roughly 25-year period. In addition to India, famine affected several countries including China, Russia, Korea, Vietnam, Brazil, New Caledonia, Egypt, the Maghreb, Ethiopia, and Sudan, where 1/3 of the population perished. Another global famine ensued from 1889 to 91. And 1896 to 1902, the monsoons failed in the tropics again, resulting in another deadly string of famines.
The planet has now entered what is called by scientists and others the Rim of Fire. The Rim of Fire can be located as starting in the South Island of New Zealand, going up through Indonesia, through Japan, to Alaska, coming down to California, and going down to Chile. And it touches a few other areas. But this is it. It's primarily the Pacific Basin, which is a rim of fire. And no nuclear explosion organized by man could ever even approximate the power of this rim of fire. The sun has recently gone into a new phase.
On March 14, 2011, Lyndon LaRouche gave these remarks in response to the Great Japan earthquake of March 11th. In the months preceding the earthquake, Lyndon LaRouche and his basement team had already been in discussion on the solar and galactic threats that humanity faces, a threat which is subsuming to all geopolitical earthbound crises to date. Earthquakes have monumental and sudden effects in loss of life and the destruction of entire cities and even nations. But given our examination of the British in India and the effect of that free trade policy throughout the world, we see a comparable force in the El Niño events in the Pacific that were conveniently turned against humanity by the empire. In effect, the empire turned the effects of successive and severe El Niño events into a weapon of mass destruction. In some areas affected by the great famines of 1876 to 1906, the land had been so depopulated of human life, it would seem to one as if an extinction event had taken place. Shaanxi, China, for instance, was so depopulated during the 1880s, they could not return to their 1875 population level until 1953. But despite the sheer power and destructiveness of those forces driving weather, an understanding of those same processes could be the windows through which we as mankind can gain a greater understanding of the universe we live in. In addition to this, we can also gain the ability to alter those weather patterns that today may seem unpredictable and out of our control. The process called El Niño and La Niña is what we'll be examining. To understand the scope of what we would be altering, let's take a quick look at an El Niño process. Early fishermen off the Ibero-American coast recognized long before any satellite images existed that a strange shift was occurring periodically, where the usually cool waters along the coast would become warm, and the fish that were usually in abundance would cease to make their way to the surface. This process would often occur beginning in December, and thus prompting the fishermen to give it its name, El Niño, or the Christ child. Given the instrumentation that we have today due to past advances in space, we understand this process as extending across an entire hemisphere and with effects that reach around the globe. To gain a better understanding of this process, let's look at what is happening under non-El Niño conditions. Usually the global trade winds blow towards the west across the tropical Pacific, which one can see in this model as a slow creeping motion consistently moving across the equator as if forming a belt around the globe. These are the trade winds that pile up warm surface water in the West Pacific, so that the sea surface is 1/2 meter higher at Indonesia than it is in Ecuador, and 8 degrees Celsius hotter. In the east, along the coast of Peru, the water is usually cold due to a process of upwelling. In this diagram, the slanted plane called the thermocline indicates the direction of the upwelling, bringing to the surface nutrient-rich water and a diversity of sea life. The east also sees less rainfall, while in the west, where the water is warmer, rainfall is more common. The ocean and atmosphere of the globe are interconnected as part of one process. El Niño is described as an oscillation of this system in the tropical Pacific. During El Niño, the ocean temperature becomes abnormally high in the southeastern equatorial region, and the trade winds relax in the central and western Pacific. The thermocline becomes depressed in the East Pacific and starts to elevate in the west, cutting off the usual route of sea life to the east. As the atmospheric heat source moves east, overlaying the warmest water, large changes in the global atmospheric circulation occur, which in turn force changes in weather in regions far removed from the tropical Pacific. However, these are just effects. At this point, we still don't know what the cause of this process is, and we don't even know when one has begun until we've seen its effects. Also, what causes the anomalous warming of the ocean surface to occur as quickly as it does when we go into an El Niño phase? Could this merely be the work of solar energy? Is our lack of knowledge of what's going on the ocean floor, but also what's going on inside the earth, be throwing us for a loop? Without a greater understanding, it's as if we're in the footsteps of an invisible giant. If we fail to take up the mastery of such challenges, we fail to understand these processes and fall back on our simple sense-perceptual interpretations of our environment. Looking for the cause of such a phenomenon requires man to change his identity from being an earth-dwelling slave to his senses to an extraterrestrial being where the development of the human mind above all is primary. On the North American continent, we see many of the imbalances that occur on other continents where there is too much water in one region, not enough in another part. Although these imbalances are seemingly constant on a short span of history, multitudes of weather anomalies have been seen in the past year, such as increase in snowfall, tornadoes, and hurricanes, which are part of indicating to us that we are currently in a dangerous part of our galaxy. There is a lot that we don't know with certainty, but the point is human life on this planet must be organized to come to understand these things very quickly, because the greatest threat to our existence is the ignorance of the universe we inhabit. The North American Water and Power Alliance is one such step to understanding our universe which must be taken immediately. Although we would be dealing with challenges in the immediate, such as flood prevention and a steady and reliable source of irrigation, we're mastering the forces of a large portion of our entire hemisphere. Given that El Niño is a giant process that affects multiple continents, something on the scale of several NWAPAs in several countries would be a major step in understanding what are intercontinental, solar, and intergalactic processes. What we do know is if we are prostrate as a society at the whim of the oligarchical tendency, the great famines will seem as nothing compared to what we'll face as mysterious forces from locations that are currently beyond our grasp. Just as the British Empire controlled and suppressed any of the necessary knowledge to keep people alive in the 19th century, today the same attack on humanity continues. Not only do the worst of all possible famines continue to threaten lives across the globe, but even the most advanced capabilities we have to secure ourselves against it are being shut down. It is not just a matter of will genocide occur. It is happening and it is completely unnecessary. Human beings have the ability to creatively gain a mastery over the forces of nature and begin to control weather on this planet. So the question is, are we in this world going to let the British Empire dominate us by leaving us open to the unseen power of nature? Or are we in the United States, with the power of our Constitution, going to eliminate empire and master the control of the forces of nature?